Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
It is going great. Just finishing out the business day here on the Thursday and ready for the evening. So what about you, Raphael? How's it going over there?
It's good, man. Today's a productive day, which is great. My birthday was yesterday, which was also fun. Just turned 31. So the best birthday yet. Each year that passes is the best birthday. So excited to be here for another trip around the sun. But speaking of just great conversation and just a great time, we had a phenomenal conversation today on a subject we really haven't talked about a lot on this podcast with Brian Perry, who's a medical office specialist at Health-Pro Realty Group, located primarily in the DC metro area. He currently resides in Tysons, Virginia, which is, just outside the DC area. And so it was interesting conversation we had pertaining to medical office in particular. I actually lived in DC for almost 2 years. And so, some of the things he was mentioning, the areas in particular, I noticed through my time residing there. And so some of the things we talked about was what exactly is medical office, because it's kind of a buzzword you hear out there, but there's delineations between medical offices, right? There's dentists, there's, OBGYNs, there's surgeons, there's plastic surgery, et cetera. So there's a variety of different uses out there. And he kind of delineated the different uses and some of the things that you look for as you're identifying properties that fit those particular uses. We also talked a little bit about the pros and cons of investing in the property type. Again, it may not be for everyone, but it is a very unique opportunity for a lot of people because of its stability and the fact that a lot of these tenants just don't go anywhere once they're actually established. Along with that, we talked about some of the things that business owners and investors look for when they're evaluating these opportunities, because there are some slight delineations between the two. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the financing opportunities for these professionals, because there's some very attractive financing programs out there if you are a medical professional looking to secure a medical office. And then on the investment end as well, a lot of banks right now love medical office because of all the factors that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. And so you can obviously secure great terms if you are, in fact, a strong borrower as well. So it's kind of an interesting topic. And we did touch at the end about the future of medical office and what that's going to look like over time. So I thought it was a great and engaging podcast. Jeff, what do you think?
Brian gave us a lot of value, especially, like you said, a business owner as well as an investor, and how you evaluate that particular, building to see if it's the right fit. And he goes in depth with that. So I can't wait for, if you definitely are looking for that, he definitely shows some value there. And I think you'll learn a lot. So I'm excited for you guys to listen.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Medical office is one of the topics that I don't think we've talked a whole lot about. So I think you guys will gain a ton of value from it. Additionally, as I always do, I love asking you guys to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really has helped significantly with our upticks as far as our downloads are concerned. I mean, we've had almost 100% increase in the last month or two as a result of you guys continuing to leave us 5-star review and engaging with the podcast. So if you don't mind, before the podcast starts, we would love it if you could just hop over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, maybe write us a comment explaining what value you gained from the podcast, and maybe some recommendations for episodes you'd like to see us actually bring on. And, we would greatly appreciate it. And even share this with a friend or a family member if you think they would gain some value from it. So let's go ahead and dive into these episodes so you guys can gain some value from it. Well, hey, Brian, great to see you. He's tuning in from Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. And I actually had the opportunity to live in DC for about 1.5 years as well. So it's a fun, great area.
Yeah, this is nice to be on here. Thanks for having me. Yes, this is my new, probably forever place to live. I've lived in a few places, New York, Boston, so here I am.
Yeah,
nice.
It's a great area. I lived in Arlington, Virginia for about 1 year, and then we moved into the city, and I lived near the Mount Vernon stop for about a year. And then I moved on to, a different site. I used to work as a software implementation consultant, and they moved me all across the nation. So You know, you were never in one place too long, but it was a lot of fun. It was a great time. And, you know, we're really excited to host you today because, you know, I think that the topic that we're going to discuss today is going to be very pertinent, particularly in today's environment. And really what we first like to do is learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. So if you don't mind, kind of give us a little bit of backstory about yourself, I think that'd be awesome.
A little backstory. I was ex-military, so I usually brand myself very heavily in the veteran space. People tend to like that. So served in the military. Then I said, I'm done with military. I was an officer, Iraq, Guantanamo Bay, served the country. And then I was like, all right, now I want to try sitting at a desk. That sounds like, you know, let's see what the financial New York City, I wanted to experience that. Living in New Jersey, you are always, you know, going into New York, and the dream is sometimes to be working in New York. So did that for about 6 years, working in finance, credit risk, Fitch Ratings. And it was a good experience, but that was like part of my journey. I never knew my end game was kind of going to be there, or, you know, I was, so we're doing that for 6 years. I was like, okay, you know, that's going to be my limit. And then kind of went to my MBA at Boston College. Wanted to see if I liked Boston. People told me all kinds of good things about it, and the, you know, the alumni network, and Boston was good. It's not New York City. I've been tainted. And it's very entrepreneurial. Met a lot of good people, but I kind of didn't know where I was going from there. And then I thought I was going to be doing marketing consulting, bought a place. And if you know Jersey, it's like the Golden Coast, Hoboken, and then going up to like Weehawken and North Bergen. It's great because you can walk outside, run along the water on the Hudson and everything. And that's where I thought I was going to end up going. And then I kind of had a change of heart in terms of the path I want to take, because if, you know, the listeners have ever been an entrepreneur, it's very hard to go about things on your own. And I thought, I was like, you know what, I can do marketing, all these other things, and I'll just build my business from scratch. And I think almost every entrepreneur thinks, oh, I'm going to be successful. Maybe they don't think that, but you kind of have to. And for me, it was like, you know what, this is not the right path. So I kind of very quickly pivoted, got an email from a military recruiter listing all these companies. And I'm like, nope, terrible. And then I saw a Health-Pro Realty Group, and I was like, okay. Commercial real estate. I don't want to talk about my political affiliations, but I read books growing up on successful real estate people. And I was like, why don't I give that a shot? And ended up in a couple of days going to Virginia, meeting. It's a family-owned business. And that's kind of how I got started. I was like, this has a lot of potential, and let's see where it goes.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I just want to start out and say thanks for your service. If you're ex-military, that we definitely appreciate that. My wife, she's a veteran as well, 20-year veteran in the military. So I can appreciate you guys. Yeah.
She lasted longer than I did. So good for her. Yeah.
Yeah. She 20 years. Yeah. It's pretty impressive. So
awesome.
So one of the things that we wanted to ask is, what is actually office space, like medical office space, and what are the pros and cons to invest in that type of property?
Right. So it is weird because I never know if I want to describe it as healthcare real estate or medical office space or dental. I'm always medical and dental, and it's like, what is going on there? So like, who invests? So if you, over the pandemic, it was like harped on, oh, healthcare has been like 97% payment rate, very high. And they do long contracts, very low default rate. So it's very enticing to have these long-term client or tenants in these buildings. And in terms of investing, it's a very safe type of investment. And for our clients, I mean, when they look to buy, they're going to maybe use a portion of it for their surgery center if they're a plastic surgeon, and then we're going to help them lease the other space there. And when you're, and you guys know, whether it's owner occupied or investment, getting people in there that are tenants like that ups the value, especially where we are, Maryland, DC, North Virginia, very crowded, very good government. A lot of people want to be in this, the DC metro area.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think Tysons Corner, if I'm not mistaken, there's actually a pretty heavy presence of medical there. Is there not, or is that incorrect?
Yeah, that is very, a lot of presence here. Just people, they're doing tons of residential building here. So people really want to be here in terms of they're coming here. So they'll all look for Tysons and then inside the Beltway, and then they'll go further if they want to, but that's like, they kind of, people come from out of town. They're like, okay, Tysons and in kind of, and then they'll have specifics, and it gets a little crowded at times, but yeah, it is a very much here in Falls Church, and along
the metro line. I mean, you start seeing significant growth, like kind of dispersing across the metro itself. And I lived in Clarendon, and I was just down the street from the metro line in Clarendon. I mean, that was in 2014 to 15, and I mean, it's a completely different place from when I was there, and that was only 6-7 years ago. You know, just so much investment.
That's what everybody, when I moved here, it was like, there's a Ritz-Carlton here. What's going on? It's like I was like, I'm in Tysons, Virginia, but it was, you know, the owners of the property, you know, people have invested really heavily here. And I just say, wherever the money goes, you're going to see development, and they're doing a lot of here. They're waiting for it's happening. People are coming back, but they're like, okay, they got to put money in. And, you know, I know John Hopkins is coming here. So a lot of people are moving in, a lot of medical office plus that retail. So they'll have the Wegmans, you know, as the anchor, and then they'll have like this medical office space that they want leased. That's more modern medical procedures that are becoming a more normal thing, you know, not just Botox, but any type of, you know, health and in and out kind of medical you can do. People are interested in.
Yeah, I know. And you highlighted the fact of the different medical uses, because what's required in a particular space is going to be very different if you're a dentist versus a surgeon versus you know, radiologist. I mean, all the different types of uses. And you kind of pointed out the long-term leases as well is a big reason why they sign these long-term leases, because of the build out that's involved, and like the actual,
because it is a big, I mean, for one doctor right now, he's spending $1 million on the build out. So if you're going to spend $1 million, I mean, he's purchasing, but imagine if you're leasing, you have to be able to break even at some point. Like, you're not going to want to start over. And that's what landlords know too. So when it comes to that renewal, they're usually not going to move unless they really don't like you, you know, or you're an landlord. So they want to stay there if the business has been successful. You know, if you're expanding too fast and you have multiple healthcare practices, sometimes you're like, okay, I need to consolidate, and that's a different story. But there is always people looking for these spaces built out, or like a way for them to save costs and move in. But the popular areas, you know, it's pretty tough. But the deals have been there throughout the pandemic, and a lot of new development, because you guys probably know, I mean, everybody wants the amenity, the certain building. So even equipment, when they purchase it 10 years later, it's really not as valuable. So it's like that. Yeah, you're right. It does come down to, you put in this money. So it becomes even more important for them to have the right place. They all show financials, have a business plan, which I think is pretty standard, but, and we use specific people to healthcare, because most people will say, oh my gosh, healthcare is so hard to understand. And a lot of nuances are like overnight ambulatory, the permitting, the coding. That's what I'm going through now. And no matter what town you're in, there's like nuances like, oh, this takes 12 months to get a permit, but here it takes 6 months or 3 months. And then I'm like, okay. So those are probably some of the, not straight line challenges.
Yeah, and that's why I think part of the reason why you work with someone who's niched a bit, because again, it's one of those things where you could be a jack of all trades, but you won't be a master of any. And so, in a situation where you're dealing with these multi-million-dollar transactions, whether you're representing business owners or investors, it's kind of nice to know that someone that's all they do, and they operate in that space on a regular basis, and then that they can execute on those types of transactions. And that kind of leads me to the next question pertaining to those people that you represent. And typically from my understanding, you represent both business owners and also, investors. But to start off with the business owner side, so imagine you're representing a doctor of some capacity and they're looking for a medical opportunity, whether, a facility, et cetera. What are some of the things they should consider as they're looking at some of these types of properties?
Well, the number one thing is always parking, because for the permitting process. But I don't always look for them retail first. There's a lot of times now people want the visibility more so than in the past. So sometimes we're looking for an office retail flex. So it might be an opportunity for them to be in the retail, but maybe it's inside the office, but they're not directly on the street, but they can get some kind of visibility outside. So because those rents that, what is it, like Smoothie King or somebody will pay, they aren't going to be able to, especially a startup. Now, if they're more established, they can pay more, but we kind of know where it's going to stretch now. I'm not going to show them the most premium location. It just doesn't work so much with their model. Maybe like a plastic surgeon, but plastic surgeon want to buy, but the retail or office, it's always, I'm thinking about what their budget is going to be, what they want, who's their, what kind of customers they serve, just like you would do any kind of marketing. You're like, okay, who are the customers you serve? What kind of, is it families or is it working people? Is it like an Arlington versus, Chantilly or something, which is like suburbs and then working DC back and forth. So it makes a difference and some of them want to be in shopping centers with a strong anchor and the foot traffic. So I really kind of look to that and where they're working now, because if you see where their environment is, they either like it or they don't. And if you take people from something that's totally different, they may not, just may not work for them. But we give enough choices to where we're confident in them. We use our resources, other brokers, because, if something's not in the budget, I'm like, hey, what's going on there with this? Is there a possibility? Because landlords want healthcare. They just don't always understand the benefit, or like, if I have a veterinarian or something, and there's a huge need in the area, I might have to sell that a bit more because they're like, oh, I don't know if I want that, but it's a real need. And it's a good approved person that can pay the freight. So sometimes that's the challenges with different uses, but that's.
Well, that's interesting you say that. Oh, go ahead, Brian. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
Yeah. Jeff, were you saying something?
Well, I was just going to go into the next question. That's all.
Oh, no, for sure. No. And I had a quick, just topic to kind of highlight on that as well, is that it's kind of interesting to hear you say that, because I've seen a lot more medical uses locating in strip centers and shopping centers, which is, interesting in that, you get to see the visibility, you capitalize on the foot traffic, but with medical uses, it's not like I'm driving by, a plastic surgeon and just decide, hey, might as well stop in there and get like a tuck somehow. Right. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say that. And, so I've worked, I know Jeff and I had talked to, a veterinary clinic that we were trying to help them place a place, and they were worried about, visibility along the road. And I was like, well, you're more of a destination location. Like if my dog's sick, I'm going to look you up online and I'm going to go to wherever you're at. I'm not necessarily going to drive down the street and just wander into a veterinary clinic. So I don't know if that's something you guys have seen a lot of.
Yeah, I think that's that's the conundrum or whatever you want to call it. Because I'm like, I try to tell them, you know, if you're here, they're still gonna find you. They're still looking you up. I mean, I don't usually have dental, retail, or vet, you know, like. So I'm like, if you want the better deal, this is probably what it's going to be, but we can find you this. If you want this, it's just going to be, you're not going to have as many incentives and it'll be a little, with retail, there's just nuances like legal things that can come up that are just much more like, oh, I didn't realize that could happen. And there's just more of a chance than an office, which is like, hey, come in here, we'll build it out and do that, because that's where the opportunities are. Retail is doing pretty well here. Yeah, I know it's not a walk-in where you're just like, oh, okay, I'm going to go. Well, I just have my dog. Then the dog suddenly gets sick and you're next to the veterinary clinic. Like you're going to look that up on Google, which is why I emphasize the online presence with everybody. I'm like, that's like more important. Figure that part out and have a good marketing person. And I think that's more important than, your walk-in clinic.
Sure. Absolutely. So Raphael asked you about the business owner side, but I want to know a little bit more about the investor side. So someone who's actually wanting to purchase the building. What are some of the things that they need to consider when evaluating that space?
So when somebody's coming in to look at that space and then they want it as I don't know if they want to convert it to a medical office or they already have existing kind of medical there. But there's there's different types of permits people can get that are, what do you call them? Just these, let's just call it a waiver or something for now to do certain procedures that will run out eventually. And you might not, if it's already in writing, you might be able to do something, but if you want overnight, are they overnight medical? Because that's a huge benefit. Okay. You'll find more buyers for that if you can get overnight ambulatory, something I'm working on now. And if it's already been in writing before, then the chances of you getting that. The parking, how much parking do they need for if they have a surgery center? Can they expand it? Green space? How easy is it to come in and out? ADA access? You want an elevator. Because if you don't have an elevator, it's not compliant and nobody will really look at it. So you would want to invest, depending if it's worth it. But then it's the location. Are you getting the return? If you're battling big investors who don't need a huge, and they can lower the cap rate, and it just depends who's competing for it. But we're always looking and seeing opportunities and then sharing those opportunities. So I think it's more trying to get in touch with who's there and, what they have kind of in their market, because people are always asking us, what's there, what can we buy? And then they'll ideally be looking for, what are they looking for? Long-term tenants, not short-term tenants, high credit tenants. That's kind of something where they can park cash for a while.
Well, I think you said it earlier too, is that the parking is a big deal too. When you're evaluating, especially which use you're going to utilize or try to change it over to. So,
yeah. And also, and in those medical bill, are they, are they all referable to each other? Is it because if you have a lot of tenants in a building, that's dangerous because it's, that's going to be harder to fill. You want a good balance of tenants, but too many small areas and empty for a while can be, hard to fill. We definitely have a preference in size for certain types of uses.
And what are some of those preferences? Because that's an interesting thing you hear you say, because I do a lot on the retail side, And there's definitely square footage that's easier to lease than others. Like if you have a 20,000 square foot retail space, there's only a certain amount of tenants out there that can actually occupy that space. Whereas maybe a 2,000 to 5,000 square feet is a lot more reasonable, you know, and you have a bunch more tenants you can actually target. So I don't know if that's maybe there's some requirements that you guys are looking at.
Yeah. And our market is, well, for dental, as an example, that 2,500 is the money line, because I have another dental company coming from out of town. They wanted a 5,000 built out dental. I'm like, that's not in our market. Like I literally had to find something and manufacture an opportunity for them, you know, to combine. But that is like, that's really hard there. That's why, you know, the bigger brokerage firms, they're not trying to work with these dental and these private equity guys that are looking for the 2,500 foot spaces. Like it's just too hard and nuanced. You know, they want the 10,000 and above. So sometimes, you know, that's what helps us, because we can help people in other markets because we've done so many. But yeah, it is nuanced. And even some of our requirements, when we're looking bigger, it's going to be, you know, the different uses will get into the 5,000 to 10,000, maybe it's an urgent care, which will be bigger as like a staple for medical. But it's, it definitely varies. But we, you know, when you're filling space, you need the bigger medical, and you're not putting you know, dental's not the first use. It might be OBGYN or some kind of big collaborative care, something that's more substantial. But if you're having that space to fill, that's 2,500 is a good number in our market.
For sure. And another thing too, and I was working on a deal last year. It was a 26,000 square foot shopping center we sold here in Louisville, Kentucky, where we're located. Yeah. And the unique thing about this particular center was that it had, you know, retail frontage. So it had a lot of different retail tenants. We had a Heitzman's bakery, like a bakery. We had a boba shop. We had nail salon, barber shop, all these different types of retail uses on the front. And in the back was a 11,000 square foot pediatric clinic. And it had a ton of parking in the back, and it just had like, you know, I think it was like almost 100 spaces in the back. And that was a driver for the center too, because, you know, the pediatric clinic had been there forever. That whole community just kind of took their kids there from a very young age. And it literally, in order to get to the back of the building, the pediatric clinic, you had to pass the retail side. So people would go by there and they'd see the bakery or whatever else. And so it creates that foot traffic that retail likes, but it also has that back component as far as medical use is concerned.
Did you guys have any kind of pointing to get back there? Any kind of signage to say, hey, there
was a sign. It was kind of a, you know, it wasn't anything special. It was like just a little sign, hey, there's a clinic back there. But the thing with that clinic too is it had been there for like 40 or 50 years. So, you know, it was like a group. It was like a pediatric group. So, you know, the doctors had turned over time, but they just maintained their location in that back center.
That was what I would try to tell them when that situation would happen. I was like, initially you want to have kind of an arrow. Something doesn't have to be professional, but then put it on your website so that they can kind of initially see where to go. So they're not like, oh, I drove by and everything. And then you're going to get a better rate going in. And if it's the location, you know, if you can be where you want to be, you can build it. Cause like you said, you're not exactly, you know, destination. You're not walking in usually to a dental place unless,
I mean, urgent care maybe, but even then it's not like I'm driving down the street with like an emergency and just trying to find an urgent care. I'm still going to try to look it up on my cell phone.
Yeah. Which is what we all do. So it's, it's one of those things you can't fight, what people want. I'm putting a veterinarian probably right in the middle of a center right now. And I'm like, all right. And it's like a little wonky with how they have to cut up the space, but you know, if that's what people want, and you know, it's a great business model because it's in between. It's like the urgent care for pets, right?
Yeah.
So I always thought that was a good need to have in a center. I think so.
Yeah, and the default rates, like you said, on some of these uses are like astronomically low. It's pretty amazing. And that's kind of one of the next questions I had for you was pertaining to the financing programs. Cause you know,
Right.
I don't do a ton in the medical space, but
Yeah.
last year we were working with like a younger veterinarian. She had been a veterinarian for 2 years, worked at an outfit here in Louisville. And then she was looking to branch off on her own. And some of the financing options she was getting, I was kind of shocked by. I was like, wow, like, you know, some of these banks really love veterinary uses. They love medical uses, and they're willing to do some really cool stuff as far as financing is concerned. Have you seen anything in particular that you kind of recommend to clients?
Yeah, for me, because I actually, in the beginning, I was getting mentored by somebody who's in banking for like 30 years. Cause I'd always be like, okay, what's going on here? Who's best for this situation? Because clients are kind of relying on you. And if you have them going to 5 banks, honestly, it's like no good for you because like they'll never get what they need in. So you need to say, okay, who's a person that's going to take care of them the best and get them a rate. So I guess the secret is, so when it's a bigger deal, if you're going to purchase, there are healthcare specific deals with the best interest rates, and very structured how they do equipment and how they do all the startup costs and everything. If it's a startup, if they have an existing one, it's a little easier for better or worse, but like they get great financing. I mean, I'm always looking at the budget and everything like that, but the best of them know how to, I guess the one secret is you can always negotiate rate. People don't like to lose to rate, banks. So, but if you know them and you recommend them, they're going to do their best to get it done. So you can be, pretty confident that they have the best package. But yeah, you have to know, because healthcare is a very niche market. So you have to work with the people that work specifically in healthcare, not the people who say they do everything, because I rarely see those get done. If it's like a banker who I've never talked to, I'm like, oh no. Here we go. Not that they're a bad person. It's just you really want somebody that's going to take care of the client, and you can't take care of the client if you don't know what you're doing. But interest rates low and everything. Obviously.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And to your point, I'm working with a car wash group right now, and they're working with a lender who just does car washes all across the nation. That's all they do. So they talk to people in Nebraska and Washington and California and New York, here in Louisville, and that's all they fund is straight car washes. And so, again, they understand the model extremely well, and they're able to underwrite accordingly because they understand it very well. And there's other groups out there that just fund, not necessarily just fund restaurants, but they're very comfortable with funding restaurants because they do a ton of restaurants. So it's similar to what you're saying. And, do you work a lot with the SBA as far as funding for?
I try to avoid the SBA at all. I mean, I'm kind of know the government a little bit. I even am working on a government contract for a big thing going out with the VA. So the last thing I want, because right now the deals there's no need to do, if the finance and everything is good. I haven't been explained that there's a good reason to have to go that way. If you're not going to put any money down, if you can get the best programs, why would you do that? Because the closings are going to be extended.
No, I get it.
Which causes me a headache. And then at the end, they're going to be like, oh, Brian, what happened here? I'm like, well, you needed this paperwork, because there's like those 3 extra layers of paperwork. So yes, in my opinion, unless you really see a benefit, and a lot of our healthcare guys have financial advisors. So if they tell them they have to go that way or something, I go ahead, but I'm not actively promoting the SBA. It just, I don't know.
And what you were mentioning pertaining to the financing programs for medical professionals, they tend to be a lot of times more competitive than the SBA anyways. I mean, I was some of the quotes that we were getting with this lady, who was a veterinary, a relatively new veterinarian. They were going to do 100% financing up to, I think, a 750 threshold or something like that, which for Louisville is like, pretty good compared to DC, maybe not. But again, that's like 0% down for a $750,000 loan, including equipment and everything else. It's like crazy, but I don't know if that's
similar if we can get up there. It does depend on their finances, but once they get approved, then it's like, then you're talking to the banker, you're saying, okay, they need this and that, and they work with you. So it's like that, cordial kind of process of trying to make it work, but not trying to overextend and be like, okay,
Sure.
but they, but I have to say, yeah, I definitely think the programs are really good, and I'm always seeing new programs too, different things. I've seen some crazy things lately with, I don't want to say which bank it was, but they were saying they're only requiring like 30% occupancy for owner something like that. I don't want to quote it because I haven't checked on it, but I was like, that's kind of a game changer leverage wise.
Oh yeah.
If you don't have to be 50%. So that was interesting, but have not vetted that out. But those are some things that get said to me, and I'm like, all right, I have to look and say that more. Yeah.
And it's cool. I mean, again, commercial financing, unlike residential financing, it's all negotiable. Like you were saying, I mean, there's, we've been in deals before where I've worked with investors and, we're going back and forth with the lender saying, hey, we want this term extended for interest rate. We want this interest rate lowered. And they're like, okay, let me go back, do a little bit of calculations. And we'll be like, okay, we're also talking to this other bank and they're giving us these terms, and it's a back and forth. And again, you want to maintain cordial relationship. You don't want to just beat them up to oblivion.
It's hard on the investor side, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm usually trying to, at that point, if I recommended somebody, I'm kind of working with them, but sometimes you need, like, if they're an investor on the financial side, you gotta make sure you're doing something with the client and making sure they're getting that deal there. But yeah, it's a good business, and I think the healthcare lenders like that I've worked with have done, a really good job trying to work with clients. Yeah.
So I know we kind of did your backstory and we spoke a little bit about the present medical office space, but I want to know, where do you see the future? Because I know we've been going through a little bit different times that we usually have, but where do you see it like evolving post pandemic?
Well, I would have already purchased in the metaverse some medical space in there or telehealth. I think I don't want to put that on the record too much, but I do appreciate the fact that there's different avenues to get certain types of tele-treatment in that sense. But like, medical and healthcare is so safe because it's only going to be more prevalent in retail and office and people wanting easier access to medical. And they're going to be more medical retail, these live, work, play kind of scenarios where I really don't see people wanting to travel that far for what they need. And they're going to want to be next to all these centers. Like, for even the project I'm working on now, there's a huge, I can't say obviously what it is, but there's a demand and a shortage of these facilities, and we have to make a ton of them in a short period of time. So in my opinion, and I just think about walking in and doing easier treatments. There's some facilities like that now and everything, but people still want an intimate relationship. I think, it's medical, and the senior population growing a lot. So you'll see a lot more senior centers, assisted living. That's been a huge thing. People wanting to kind of invest in that because of the population. They have that in Tysons too. I think they're building one right now, like a 55 and over. But I just see that more integration where even in the mall in Tysons, there's a dental in the mall, and Tysons is, that's not a cheap mall to be in. That's like a flagship mall in the area. I'm like, what is this doing in here? Maybe, and everybody wants things quicker and more convenient. So there's no, and I think they'll help with the office market coming back too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And interesting to hear you say telehealth, because it has been it's
Yeah.
been kind of like a boom of telehealth over the last 2 years. I mean, I've seen many people. I've talked to, you know, when you're doing consultations, a lot, you can get these consultations quickly online. And, obviously there needs to be some form of physical interaction at some point, depending on, physical checks ups and stuff. But, it's kind of interesting to hear you say that the telehealth piece, because I think that's not going away. I mean,
It has flattened out, I think, since the pandemic surge and everything. And that was already in the works of them trying to make, especially if you're in a rural area where there's not a lot of access, or where you have to travel so far to get care, you need that option. And I think they have ways to check your vitals and stuff. But in terms of them going into retail and office, I'm not concerned about the long-term kind of prospects there. I just feel it's going to be more expansive, especially in the taking care of the preventative health. That's a big market. So anything to lose weight and to just improve your overall vitality and appearance and long term, as people live longer. So those crypto chambers and anything you can do to kind of make yourself feel better. That's a lot of spas and that kind of thing will continue to grow.
That's
Sure. On the telehealth thing, I know that in Japan, they actually are making this med pod that you kind of get in and you sit down in, and it's kind of like what we're doing here, and we talk, but then they check your vitals and stuff. They have arm sleeves, and you put the little, and then they have all these devices already in the pod, and they tell you, hey, grab this, wrap it around your arm. And
so that's an idea where you might have to travel a little bit to these pods or something, but it would be something that's kind of set up, but they wouldn't have to have. I could see that happening for sure.
I was kind of picturing them like you gave me an idea. It was like what you were saying in the mall is, you go up to one of the kiosks and it's a med pod, and you get in and you do your consultation and you see where you're at. And then you maybe, okay, well, now you really do need to come in, and then you go and
you're in the mall. That would be a big benefit to the mall too.
Yeah.
I could see, I would do that. I can walk over to the mall from my apartment here. I live on the plaza. So that's I would walk over, and I would like to, that would be nice, because I don't like going to the VA. Unless I really need to.
Need to, yeah.
And the footprint involved in that too would be interesting too, because if you think about it, let's say you have 20 pods or 30 pods on site. I mean, that's not going to take up a significant amount of space either. So from a price per square foot perspective, you could probably charge decently, I'm sure, if you're trying to attract those type of tenants. But that's interesting.
I mean, a lot of people would want their parents and other people who are health risks to have that nearby. So I could see that being a driver. That's a good idea.
That's awesome. We'll have to document that so we can start a medical pod business. That's awesome.
So we're gonna flagship it over there at Brian's Mall and see how it works out. So
that's awesome. So one thing I wanted to ask you, and this is typically what we ask most of our guests, is our audiences, we're all voracious readers. We love to read different books on a variety of different subjects, not just real estate. So I kind of wanted to ask you, what is maybe one of the most impactful books you've ever read? And it doesn't have to necessarily be real estate related, but
I saw that you guys asked this question. I'm looking at my bookshelf on which one I like, because I don't want to say Robert, was it Cialdini Persuasion or something? Because I heard somebody said that. I'm like, but I am very much interested in the marketing and sales process in terms of because I believe our business is based a lot on referrals and people actually liking us. And I don't think you can really fake people thinking that you care. So I like Russell Brunson Expert Secrets and .com Secrets, if only because it shows you that hero journey, where people are coming from. If you're an investor, owner, user, they're all trying to get somewhere along the way. And a lot of times they're just kind of stopping themselves, and you need to learn when to push and when to pull back and hit the right levers. So that's kind of a lot of what I read is a lot more business books. So those, and I don't see a lot of people doing that in commercial with their marketing and everything, understanding that's, that part of the aspects. And if you can sell online, I feel you can almost kind of sell anybody. So those books, Expert Secrets, and I think .com Secrets were my first couple books that I read that I was like, wow, yeah, this is, you could build a successful business off of this.
That's amazing, man. And I love the hero's journey, piece that you said, because you're right. We're all, actors in our own story. And so people have this own idea of what their life is and how their role within it. And if you can kind of be a guide within that journey and help them realize their ultimate goal and dream, I mean, that in and of itself is, what inspires loyalty and, the referral piece, which is what you were mentioning.
And I think, so we all try to be the hero to everyone instead of the guide for their journey, like making them, so always try not to, you're trying to make them, get to where they need to be as that guide along the way. Not that I'm so great guy, talking, but so that's, those books I feel are helpful, and a lot of sales books too.
That's amazing.
Brian, to start rounding out the closing process, what we typically ask is we have a CRE treasure chest, which is a repository of things that people that came on as guests had given us. It could be a PDF or a newsletter, just or an ebook or some sort. And we like to ask our guests, what are you willing to contribute today?
Okay, so I think the best thing for me, since I'm pretty much obsessed with niching down and kind of focusing, is kind of showing what I've done to kind of, be that LinkedIn influencer list and kind of some things you can do, on social media or to just kind of, brand yourself a little better. So I'll do a PDF of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, and for those of you guys who don't follow Brian on LinkedIn, I mean, he does a phenomenal job, of just, showcasing his knowledge and ability, and also incorporating, because we're all in the business of real estate, but, it's nice to also know a little about the person as well. And so incorporating some of the personal side of things as well is super helpful. So we're looking forward to seeing that, because I'm going to read it and then try to incorporate some of the things into my social media strategy game. So.
Sounds good.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for stopping by the podcast. If people wanted to learn more about you, maybe get in contact with you if they're looking at medical office or medical facilities within your area, how would you want them to get in contact with you?
Go to my website. It's not my company website. It's my personal website is findmedicalofficespace.com. That's the easiest way to find me.
How'd you get that URL? That's awesome.
Yeah.
In my past entrepreneurial life, I think I tried a million things, and I was just like, let me just try something basic. I was like, okay, yeah, I think it's pretty good. And now I'm starting to do the YouTube videos and everything. So it's all a process, but I'm happy with that. I think it'll be good over time. But yeah, that's the best way to reach me, or LinkedIn. And I have all my info on there. Awesome. I have a second phone, but I currently still have my Jersey, a cell phone I give people, because I tried to have it. I don't know if you've tried this, but if you have another phone and you try to switch over, it's really hard to have two different phones when some people know you on that number. And I'm like, I don't want to carry around two phones. So, but yeah, all my information's on LinkedIn and the Find Medical Office Space.
Yeah. Perfect. And we'll include that in the show notes as well. So if you guys are watching this in a podcast format or YouTube format, it's going to be in the description. And as far as the two phones thing, I kind of face something similar, because I have an Arizona number. I went to Arizona State for university, maintain that phone number. And you should check out Google Voice, because I have a Google Voice app that generates a new number for me. It's a local number. So people have, my local number.
I have it. I have the new iPhone and everything right here, and I have the new number.
Do you have the Google Voice? Go download the Google Voice app, and then it'll all get diverted to that one phone. And that's what I do. And people have my Louisville number, which is my work number, and they can just contact me, and it goes to the same phone. So
That's good. That is a good tip because it's a real struggle right now.
Yeah.
Trying to get people on that line, but
that's awesome.
All right.
Well, Brian, we greatly appreciate your time and sharing your insights pertaining to medical office. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and ensures more and more people can hear this message. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether you're looking at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. We've seen a significant uptick in our downloads as a result of you guys actually engaging with the podcast. So if you guys don't mind taking 30 seconds, just go on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, maybe leave us a comment to hear about what you want to hear next. That would be greatly appreciated. So thank you all for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.